Before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, Fabulous, the #1 self-care app to help you build better habits and achieve your goals. Changing and creating new habits isn't easy. I'm sure I'm not surprising you by saying that, because creating new habits is difficult for a lot of people. That's why I love the Fabulous app. Fabulous breaks down scientifically proven healthy habits into small, manageable tasks that you can easily do daily. I used to have a hard time getting focused in the morning. Fabulous is now helping me get organized in the morning by gradually adding new habits. For example, for the first 3 days, I drank a glass of water every morning after I woke up. Then, once that routine was established, I added a habit of eating a healthy breakfast. Fabulous even had a reminder to buy the groceries to make the healthy breakfast. What's great is now that I've got a good morning routine, it helps me feel good the rest of the day. Of course, Fabulous doesn't just want to help you create habits when it comes to what you eat and drink. It's 100% personalized, so you can tailor it to your own needs. It provides you with schedules, tasks, and reminders to help you make the changes you want in your life. For myself, I scheduled in 30 minutes to read my book at the end of the night. Unlike a lot of other self-care apps, Fabulous lets you go at your own pace, but it's still fun and rewarding. Right now, Fabulous has a great deal for criminally listed viewers. If you click on the link below this video, you'll get a free week and up to 25% off a Fabulous subscription. Feel better, become more productive, and help support criminally listed by checking out Fabulous. Number 3. Karina Holmer. Karina Holmer lived in the village of Skillingrud, Sweden. She had always wanted to travel. When Karina was 20 years old, she won 10,000 crowns from a lottery ticket that she bought at a convenience store. That was about the equivalent of $1,500 US. It was enough money for Holmer to start her adventure. She contacted a company that places au pairs in the United States. She was connected with a couple, Frank Rapp and Susan Nitcher, who lived in Dover, a wealthy suburb of Boston, Massachusetts. They had 2 children. Holmer cared for the children and cleaned up around the house. She also lived with the family. Frank Rapp was a commercial real estate photographer and his wife was an artist. Rapp had an apartment in South Boston, which he used as an office. On the weekends, Holmer was allowed to use it. That was what she was doing on the night of June 21st, 1996. Holmer had come to the apartment the night before, and she had to be back at the family's condo the next night. June 21st is during the summer solstice, which is a time of celebration in Sweden. On that night, 20-year-old Karina Holmer went out with some friends to some nightclubs in Boston. At the end of the night, they ended up at a bar called Zanzibar. Most of Holmer's friends went home before her. She ended up staying until after her last call at Zanzibar. She was last seen outside the bar after it had closed. Later that afternoon, a homeless man was rifling through a dumpster near Fenway Park. He touched a bag, and he realized that there was a human body in the dumpster. So he called the police. In the dumpster, the police found the unclothed upper half body of a young woman. The lower half of her body was not in or around the dumpster. When Frank Rapp and Susan Nitcher heard reports that the dead body of a young woman had been found in a dumpster, Rapp called the city morgue. The remains were identified as 20-year-old Karina Holmer. It appeared that she had been strangled to death with a rope and then she was cut in half. Despite extensive searches, the lower part of the body has never been found. The police were baffled by the crime. The police had no idea who would want to hurt the young woman. She had only been in the country for about 3 months. She was quiet and polite, and presumably she hadn't made any enemies. The police talked to Frank Rapp twice, but after the second interview, Rapp said that he had been cleared as a suspect. The police suspected that Holmer may have been cut in half because she had been sexually assaulted, and the killer did something with the lower half to make sure that his DNA wasn't identified. Another major problem is that the police didn't have a crime scene to investigate. Crime scenes can yield valuable evidence like fingerprints, hairs, blood, the murder weapon, and etc. Or the crime scene is someone's home or place of business. That helps narrow down the suspect list. But the police have no idea where Holmer was killed and dismembered. The only thing that they knew for sure was that the top half of her body was placed in the dumpster. A partial fingerprint was found on the garbage bag which contained the body, but it has never been matched to anyone. The police talked to several people who were with Karina Holmer at the nightclub. One of Holmer's friends said that she saw her outside the bar after the last call. She was with an older man and they were going to an after party. Another friend said he saw Holmer in a gray Mitsubishi with two men. He told Holmer to get out of the car and come back with a group. One of the men told him to get lost or they would crush his skull. The police talked to some of Holmer's friends who lived in Sweden. She supposedly wrote to one friend that she didn't like having to clean up around the family's home. Also, the job wasn't exactly what she expected. In a letter to a different friend, Holmer wrote that something terrible had happened. Holmer didn't explain what terrible thing had happened, but she told her friend that she would tell her when she returned to Sweden. Holmer planned on going home in August. There is some speculation that the terrible thing led to the murder. But no evidence backs up that theory, and no one is even sure what Holmer was talking about when she referred to the terrible thing. Unfortunately, the police only have speculation and theories without much evidence to back up anything. They consider the possibility that more than one person was involved in the murder. But after some consideration, the lead detective thinks that only one person was involved in the murder. He does not think that more than one person could keep something like that a secret for over 2.5 decades. It's been nearly 25 years since 20-year-old Karina Holmer was brutally murdered. The bottom half of her body has never been found. No one has ever been arrested for her murder. The investigators say that they are haunted by the case. The investigators, along with Karina's family and friends, hope that one day soon, the case will be solved. Number 2. Susan Nason. On September 22, 1969, Susan Nason was 9 years old. Susan lived in Foster City, California, which is on a man-made island in the Bay Area. Foster City had just been established a few years earlier, and a little more than 9,000 people lived in the city. Susan lived with her mother, Margaret, her father, Donald, and her 11-year-old sister, Shirley. She had an all-black dachshund named Snoopy. Susan was just 5 days shy of her 10th birthday. Her parents had invited 11 other girls to go ice skating at a local rink for her birthday. Susan was excited because she had never gone ice skating before. On September 22, 1969, Susan attended school. She came home with an extra pair of shoes that belonged to a girl who lived in the neighborhood. There are conflicting reports as to why Susan had the shoes. Susan either borrowed the shoes or the girl brought them for gym class, forgot them, and Susan brought them home so that she could return them. Nevertheless, Susan asked her mother if she could go take the shoes over to her friend's home. At the time, Margaret was sewing together a dress for Susan's birthday. She decided to let Susan walk over to her friend's house by herself. After all, it was 4 p.m., so it was still daylight, and the girl just lived a block away. Susan dropped off the shoes, but she didn't come home. When Susan didn't return, her family and then her neighbors started searching for Susan. Around 7 p.m., her parents reported her missing. Hundreds of volunteers helped search for her. Officers from every police department in the area and the FBI helped search for the girl. But sadly, no trace of Susan Nason was found. For Margaret and Donald, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that no parents want to go through. Susan's 10th birthday passed without her being found. Weeks and then months went by. On December 2nd, 1969, 70 days after Susan went missing, a patrolman was walking through an abandoned gravel pit about 8 miles from the family's home. Under a discarded box spring mattress, he found the skeletal remains of a little girl. Based on the clothing, Susan's parents identified the remains as their daughter. The right side of Susan's skull had been crushed. Close to her body was a 3-pound rock that had blood and hair on it. The medical examiner concluded it was the murder weapon. Her hand was also injured, and the stone on her ring on her finger had come out. It's believed that Susan tried to defend herself by putting her hand up. The police believe that the murder happened where the body was found. The logic was it didn't make much sense to transport a murder weapon like a rock to a different location. It could have easily been discarded anywhere if she had been killed elsewhere. Also, the rock seemed like a weapon of convenience. The killer just picked it up and bashed her and then dropped the rock. The people of the Bay Area were shocked by the kidnapping and murder. Unfortunately, the police had very few leads. Several children said that on the day that Susan was kidnapped, they remembered a man in a station wagon who stopped and offered them a ride. But the police were unable to identify the man, and it's not known if he killed Susan. It wasn't long before the case went cold, and it was largely forgotten. The 1960s ended, the 1970s went by, and then the 1980s began. In November 1989, just as the decade was coming to an end, a man who only identified himself as Barry called the police. He said that his wife had some information about murder, but she was reluctant to come forward because the killer was related to her. In that initial conversation, Barry didn't give much other information. He called again 2 more times over the next 2 days. In those phone calls, Barry explained that his wife had memories of someone in her family committing the murder. But she was afraid of him, and she didn't want to reveal his name or her name. 4 days after the initial call, Barry called back, and this time, his wife talked to the police. The woman said that when she was 8 years old, she and the killer picked up Susan Nason. They drove her out to some woods near Half Moon Bay, where Susan's body was later found. Once the killer parked in the woods, he raped Susan in the back seat. Afterward, he took her out of the car. He hit her twice on the head with a rock. He then made her help him put the box spring over Susan's body. He told her that if she ever said anything to anyone about the murder, he would kill her. After the call, a deputy district attorney looked at Susan's case, and he believed that the woman was telling the truth. He talked to the woman on the phone again and told her that he believed her. The woman said that she had never read a newspaper account about the murder. The woman then revealed that her name was Eileen Franklin Lipsker, and she had been a childhood friend of Susan's. The killer was her father, George Franklin. That day, Eileen met with the detectives and gave a more detailed account of the murder. Eileen said that her father was driving her and her sister to school. She also said that it might have been around lunchtime. They came across Susan and offered her a ride. Susan got in the van and her father told her sister to get out. Her father then told her and Susan that they were going to play hooky. They drove to a wooded area near Half Moon Bay where he raped Susan on a mattress in the back of the van. Afterward, he struck her in the head twice with the rock. One time, Susan put up her hand and the rock hit her ring. When that happened, a stone was knocked out of the ring. She helped her father get the mattress out of the back of the van, but she didn't remember what he did with the mattress. It was not the mattress that was used to cover the body. Elaine explained that her mother, Lee Palufo, and her father were divorced. For years, Lee thought that George had killed Susan, and she had even confronted him about it. Eileen was asked if she witnessed the murder, why had it taken her 20 years to come forward. She explained that she only had vague recollections of the murder, but recently they had become more vivid. She also talked about the horrible things that her father allegedly did, like sexually and physically abuse her and her sister. The police wondered if Eileen had some type of vendetta against her father. But nevertheless, they proceeded to investigate George Franklin. The police then interviewed Eileen's sister, Janice. She said that her father was abusive, and she had a feeling that he might have killed Susan. She had even called the police 5 years earlier, in 1984, and told them about her feeling. On November 28, 1989, 50-year-old George Franklin was arrested. At the time, he was working as a real estate agent. He had been a firefighter until 1981, and then he retired on disability. While George was in jail awaiting trial, Eileen came to visit him. She confronted him and told him to plead guilty to spare their family the embarrassment of a trial. Supposedly, he refused to say anything, and he pointed to a sign that read, "Conversations may be monitored." Eileen took this as an admission of guilt. George Franklin went to trial 11 months after he was arrested. By that time, it came out that Eileen had not had vague memories of the murder that suddenly became more vivid. Instead, she had supposedly completely forgotten about the murder until January 1989. At the time, she had a 5-year-old daughter. One day, her daughter and her friend were playing on the floor in front of her, and she looked into her daughter's eyes. Suddenly, the memory of the murder came back to her. Supposedly, over the next 10 months, the memory became more vivid. There was no physical evidence that connected George to the murder, so Eileen was the star witness. To back up what she said, Dr. Lenore Terre, a psychiatrist with a background in childhood trauma, testified. Terre testified that repressed memories were a real thing. She said that people could bury horrible memories in their mind, keep them hidden for years, even decades, and then suddenly recall them. She said that Eileen was a classic example of someone who suffered repressed memories. Eileen also talked about visiting her father in jail and his refusal to talk when she confronted him. The defense argued that Eileen was making up her story. They noted she was often inconsistent when she repeated the story. She would tell different versions of the story to different people. The defense pointed out that Eileen had signed lucrative TV and book deals that would pay out if her father were to be convicted. Also, the details that Eileen gave did match the details of the murder. Notably, Eileen said that her father kidnapped Susan while they were walking to school, or possibly around lunchtime. But Susan was kidnapped after school. The trial lasted a month. Then the jury deliberated for about 8 hours. They found George Franklin guilty of first-degree murder. It was the first time that anyone had ever been convicted based on recovered memories. In early 1991, there was a sentencing hearing. The judge called George Franklin wicked and depraved. He then sentenced George to life in prison. After the trial, Eileen co-wrote a book, Sins of the Father, and a made-for-TV movie about her alleged experiences, Failed Memories, aired on NBC. She also appeared on many talk shows. An appeals expert started working on George's case shortly after he was convicted. But years went by before any progress was made on the appeals. During those years, more people became skeptical of repressed memories. One of those people was Eileen's mother, Lee Pelufo. She no longer believed her daughter's story. But the most damning was that in August 1984, about 8 months before Eileen said she had the original flashback, she underwent hypnosis for weight loss. She told her brother that during the hypnosis, she witnessed the murder. Also, it was only after she received the hypnosis that she started talking about the murder. California has strict laws regarding testimony obtained through hypnosis. Eileen was informed of this by the district attorney before her father went to trial. So she told her brother not to tell anyone that she had undergone hypnosis. But when he was questioned, he told investigators about the hypnosis. Also, it turned out that everything Eileen said about the murder could be found in newspaper accounts about the murderer. She did not have any knowledge about the murder that wasn't printed in a newspaper. The defense tried to argue this in the original trial, but the judge would not allow them. Also, Eileen should not have been able to talk about visiting her father in jail. For all these reasons, in April 1995, the conviction was overturned. The biggest problem was that Eileen had undergone hypnosis. That meant if her father were to be retried, she would not be allowed to testify. On July 3, 1996, it was announced that the district attorney's office would not try George Franklin again, and he was released from jail. He had served about 6 years in prison. Today, it's largely believed that George Franklin was wrongly convicted. Today, the concept of repressed memories is considered highly controversial. Notably, it has been scientifically discredited. Sadly, despite the drama surrounding the murder of 9-year-old Susan Nason, the crime remains unsolved. Unfortunately, in the 5 decades since her murder, no forensic evidence has been saved. So unless someone comes forward with real information, it's likely that the case will never be solved. Number 1. Blair Adams. On July 11, 1996, the police in Knoxville, Tennessee, were called to the parking lot of a hotel that was under construction. 2 construction workers had found the dead body of a man in the parking lot. When the police arrived, they found a truly bizarre crime scene. The dead man's pants were on the ground close to him, and they were inside out. The police said it looked like someone else had pulled his pants off. His shirt had been ripped open. His socks and his shoes were off, and they were found close to his body. His socks were apparently inside out. One of his shoes was under his head. It appears that he used the shoe as a pillow as he was dying. Initially, the police thought that the victim was a vagrant, but there was about $4,000 in American, Canadian, and German currency in his pockets and scattered near his body. Also found near his body was a hotel key card for a hotel that was half a mile away and some keys. Not far from his body was a fanny pack. It was full of valuables like 5 ounces of gold bars, gold and platinum coins, jewelry, more keys, and a pair of sunglasses. In total, it was about $2,000 worth of valuables. An autopsy was performed on the man. He had several cuts on his hands that appeared to be defensive wounds. He had a long cut that was black on one of his hands. It's believed that he got the cut when he was knocked to the pavement and used his hand to break his fall. He had a cut on his forehead that was most likely caused by a blunt object. He was also struck hard in the abdomen, possibly with the blunt object. This was the blow that caused his death. It ruptured his stomach and he died from septic shock. The medical examiner thought that the murder weapon was a club or a crowbar. He may have also been kicked or struck with a vehicle. The man was found at a hotel that was under construction and rebar was at the site. So it's possible that he was beaten with a piece of rebar. Testing was done, but the investigators were never definitively able to say what caused the fatal blow. The police identified the man as 31-year-old Blair Adams. Before his murder, Adams lived 3,000 miles away on the other side of the continent in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. The lead-up to Blair Adams' murder was as bizarre and mysterious as the murder itself. The year before his murder, in 1995, Adams had worked for his father's company on a project near Frankfurt, Germany. His father owned a prefab construction company and they were working on an assisted living facility. In November 1995, while living in Germany, Adams started dating a woman. At some point, he returned to Canada. In the summer of 1996, Adams was working as a construction foreman for a company in Surrey. He was apparently quite proud of his job and he was a good worker. But then, during that summer of 1996, Adams started having problems. He couldn't sleep and he had violent mood swings. Adams told his mother, Sandra Edwards, that something was bothering him, but he wouldn't tell her what the problem was. On Friday, July 5th, 1996, 6 days before he was found dead in Knoxville, Adams drained his bank accounts of about $6,000 and took all of his valuables, worth about $2,000, out of his safety deposit box. He then drove to his uncle's home in Courtenay, British Columbia. It takes about 4 hours to drive from Surrey to Courtenay, and it includes a trip on a ferry. His uncle wasn't home, so Adams returned home. On Sunday, July 7th, Adams was driving his Chevrolet Chevette and he tried to board a ferry in Victoria, British Columbia that was heading to Seattle, Washington. He was flagged down by U.S. custom agents because he was a single man traveling with a large amount of money. They thought he might be a drug courier. They asked him if he had a criminal record, and he said he did not, which was a lie. Adams had convictions for assault and drugs. The border agents decided not to admit Adams into the United States. Blair Adams then drove to Vancouver, British Columbia, where he visited a friend. He then traveled to New Westminster, British Columbia, where he visited another friend. He told one of these friends he wanted to cross the border because someone wanted to kill him, but he did not elaborate. Finally, on that Sunday, Adams visited his mother in Surrey. She said he was clearly upset, and he told her that he planned on quitting his job. He also said that he didn't want to stay in his apartment, and he spent the night at his mother's home. The next morning, which was Monday, July 8th, Adams went to his work site. He quit his job and he collected his last paycheck. A few hours later, Adams purchased a plane ticket for Frankfurt, Germany. But a few hours later, he called the airline and asked for a refund for the ticket. He said he was no longer going to Germany because the person he was going to visit had fallen ill. The police got in contact with Adams' girlfriend in Frankfurt. She said that Adams had not planned on visiting her, and she has no idea why he planned to travel to Frankfurt. Later that night, Adams visited a friend. He told her that someone wanted to hurt him and he needed to get across the border. His friend told him that they were unable to help him. The next morning, which was Tuesday, July 9th, Blair Adams tried to cross the border into Surrey on foot. The border crossing agents noted he had scratches on his hands and his legs. A blue car that had been stolen in Vancouver the day before was found abandoned near the border crossing. Adams matched the description of the car thief. The police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Adams for the car theft, so they allowed him to try to cross the border. But the border agents denied him entry into the United States. Sometime later, one of Adams' friends in Vancouver said that they saw Adams driving a blue car that didn't belong to him. Hours after Adams was turned away at the border, he drove to the Vancouver International Airport. He abandoned his car in the parking lot. Adams had called and confirmed earlier that he could return his plane ticket to Frankfurt, so he did that day at the airport. He then rented a Nissan Altima. Then, for the third time, he tried to cross the border into the United States. This time, he was granted access and he entered Seattle. Adams promptly drove to the Seattle airport and ditched the car. He then purchased a one-way ticket for an overnight flight to Washington, D.C. Once again, this was a strange move for Adams. He paid about $770 for a one-way ticket, but he could have purchased a round-trip ticket for half that price. Nevertheless, he boarded a plane that night and he arrived at Dulles International Airport on the morning of Wednesday, July 10th. In about 24 hours, he would be found dead. At 6:45 a.m., Adams rented a white Toyota Camry. He then started driving southwest, which was odd. Why would he fly all the way east, only to drive back in the direction he came from? Near Troy, Virginia, he backed his car into another man's car. There was only minor damage. The man said that Adams was nice, but he was in a hurry. At 5:30 p.m., Blair Adams was at a gas station in Knoxville, Tennessee. He had problems getting his car started, and he asked the gas station attendant for help. The gas station attendant was easily able to figure out the problem. Adams wasn't using the correct key. He was trying to start the car with a key for a Nissan, and he was driving a Toyota. The attendant told him that he drove there, so he must have the proper key. But Adams swore he didn't have the key. He emptied his pockets, and it appeared that he didn't have it. Believing he had lost the key, Adams tried to contact the rental company, but they were closed for the night. A tow truck took his rental car to a local garage, and Adams was dropped off at a nearby hotel. For about 40 minutes, he paced around the outside of the hotel. He walked in and out of the lobby 5 times. On his 6th trip into the lobby, he finally paid for a room. Adams had paid $100 for the room, and he didn't take his change. The clerk said that Adams was nervous, and he kept thinking someone was going to walk into the lobby looking for him. He was given the card key for his room, and they walked out of the office. But he never went into his room. The front desk clerk called his room several times to let him know that she had his change, but he never answered his phone. After visiting the hotel, Adams ate dinner somewhere. The medical examiner found lettuce, shrimp, and some other type of meat in his stomach. Around 7:30 a.m. the following day, 31-year-old Blair Adams was found dead in a hotel's parking lot. This hotel was about half a mile away from the hotel where he had rented the room. His dead body was surrounded by his money, and he had money in his pockets. Also, his fanny pack full of valuables was untouched. One item that was found was the key to the Toyota Camry that Adams swore he had lost, which is why he ended up staying in Knoxville. So what exactly happened to Blair Adams? The theories abound. One theory is that Adams was involved in a drug deal. But there is no evidence like phone records or correspondence that indicated he was meeting up with anyone. Other people have speculated that Adams owed money to the wrong people. But there are several problems with this theory. The first is that Adams had several $1,000s in his bank accounts. It is assumed he would have used this money before he borrowed money from someone like a loan shark. If he was in debt to someone dangerous, why hadn't he handed over the money he did have? Also, illegal debt collectors don't like to kill their debtors because they can't collect any more money if they kill them. So they would rather threaten or injure the debtor. Possibly they could kill someone close to the debtor. Also, if Adams was killed over a debt, why didn't the killer steal any of the money or valuables that he had on him? And it simply doesn't make sense that a loan shark would chase Adams from Surrey, British Columbia to Washington, D.C., then follow him to Knoxville, Tennessee to kill him and not take as much money and valuables as they could. So the police are very doubtful that he was killed over a financial debt. Before Adams left British Columbia, he told several friends that people wanted him dead. He even told a few friends who those people were. In 1995, Adams worked for his father's company in Germany. Adams said that people coming back from Germany were the ones who wanted to hurt him. But he didn't identify anyone specifically or explain why they wanted to hurt him. The police are not convinced that anyone was after Adams. They think that he was delusional. One theory is that Adams was on drugs and alcohol, and this caused him to act paranoid. After all, in the past, Adams did have problems with drugs and alcohol. But the autopsy revealed he had no drugs or alcohol in his system. Adams also didn't have a history of mental illness. He had never been diagnosed with a mental disorder. Also, Adams was paranoid about being murdered, and then he was murdered. To quote Joseph Heller, Catch-22, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you. So was Blair Adams delusional, or was someone really after him? It's quite possible that Adams' paranoia and his murder are completely unrelated. He could have just happened to be paranoid, and then he was killed in Knoxville by someone unrelated to his paranoia. For example, there were signs that Adams had been sexually assaulted, but the police weren't sure if the assault actually happened because no DNA was left behind. So Adams could have been killed by a local he had not met before that night during the commission of a sex crime. Adams' mother told the police that her son had been physically intimate with a male roommate sometime before his death. So perhaps his murder was the result of a sexual encounter with a man that went deadly wrong. Another possibility is that Adams met with a sex worker and either she or her pimp killed him. Perhaps the sex worker and her pimp planned on robbing Adams, but then they got scared and didn't do it. Or things got out of hand during the robbery, they panicked and fled the scene without stealing anything. One investigator believes that this is what happened. He thinks that Adams was involved in a sex act in a car. He was struck in the head and he fell out of the car. Then he was possibly struck by the car as the person drove away. As he fell to the ground, he put out his hand to break the fall, and this is how the black cut got on his hand. When he was struck by the car, his stomach was ruptured and he died within minutes. However, not everyone is convinced that this is what happened. This includes other investigators on the case. In 2017, the Knoxville News Sentinel published an article about Blair Adams' bizarre murder. They interviewed his mother, Sandra Edwards, and she gave a new detail that she never told the police. She said that her son was traveling to Atlanta, Georgia to see the Summer Olympics. The Olympics opened 8 days after his body was found. Adam's mother then hung up the phone without giving any further explanation. She also didn't explain to the reporter why she didn't tell the police he was going to the Olympics. The reporter called back several times, but most of his calls went unanswered. One time that he called, Edward's husband answered the phone. He said that he wasn't going to open that can of worms again, and the chances of solving the case were remote as hell. The police have one piece of physical evidence. It is a long strand of hair that was found in Adams' hand. The hair does not belong to Adams. It may be possible to get DNA from the hair. For years, the only way to get DNA from a strand of hair is if the hair had a root. But in September 2019, it was announced that DNA could be extracted from rootless hair. Also, in the last several years, we've seen the rise of genetic genealogy, which has identified dozens of killers in cold cases. So as long as the strand of hair has been properly preserved, it may just be a matter of time before investigators find out who the strand of hair belongs to. It may belong to the killer, or it could lead to the break that the case needs. The police are hoping that someone will come forward with information regarding the murder. As of right now, after nearly 25 years, the murder of Blair Adams remains cold. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of our podcast, Into the Killing. In this week's episode, we take a look at the gruesome murder of a pregnant woman. The woman's romantic rival wanted her dead, but did she really do it? Check out Into the Killing and decide for yourself. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere else you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.